Hey everybody, so we're going to go over the parts of section 3 that were the extra readings, not the extra readings, the little short kind of snippets at the end. And first I'm going to, I don't know what's happening here. It's freezing up. Here we go. All right, I'm going to share my screen if I can get it to work. Hold on a minute. Okay, sorry. I'm gonna go ahead and share my screen as I have some technical difficulties. There we go. All right, so first we're going to do it with Lorber's The Social Construction of Gender. And we talked a lot about this in the chapter 3 recordings, but I just kind of want to touch base with you all again. The idea of West and Zimmerman's doing gender, which is this idea that we all, as we move through the world, we essentially do gender within our interactions, within our actions, within our choices on what and who and how we interact with other people. And it's very much really getting at this idea that gender is not this just innate thing. It's not something that is just represented in appearance. It's not something that's just represented in one particular way of being. The gender is really about the way in which we interact with the world, and it's definitely a very social identity. It talks, this particular article talks about gender also as a social institution. And by that, they mean that you have, like it's also something that you ascribe membership to, right? So if you identify as male or female, you're ascribing membership to that category, to that identity, to that particular section of being. And that membership is very distinct on qualifications, and those qualifications can be anything from the way you sit, the way you act, the way you talk, the way you dress, the way you the emotions that you carry or how you display them, the personality traits that you have, the subjects you want to study in school, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All the things that we gender, right? And within these structures, there's stratification. And by that, they mean that we very much hierarchically rank our genders, and we very much rank men and male personalities and gender identities towards the top. And we definitely rank female genders underneath them. And then we rank like gender nonconforming individuals or trans individuals or what have you underneath these ranks. And all of those rankings are also intersected with identities of race, class, and what have you. And that these things all connect when we are doing work. So how we do work and what kind of works, what kind of labor we do in the household, what kind of labor we do outside of the household, whether or not we are the primary breadwinner, all of these things are connected to this institution or this idea of what gender is. And then those things hold power, prestige, opportunities is one of the things, and economic rewards. And the higher you are in the rank, the more likely you are to adhere or be granted these power dynamics, the higher ups on these prestige, these economic rewards, especially when it comes to coming to promotions or job security or what kind of jobs you have or what rank you have within those job fields. That the higher you are on this, societally ranking stratification system, the higher and more likely you are to have those higher positions and thus the economic gains that come with them. And then again, how we maintain social norms and power. And this was very much part of the gender lecture as well, but just to reiterate, their social sanctions, and just we do those through the basic interactions we have. We maintain social and power and control for those ideal types through media, through the hidden curriculums and education. And by hidden curriculums, we mean those things that are taught in schools through peer interactions and through teacher-student interactions that are not technically labeled as part of the curriculum, but it also teaches young students and young individuals how to move through the world, how to be humans within that society. And those are things like your rules. Those are things like making sure the little girls at the daycare sit with their legs crossed and all that jazz, right? Then you have all the isms, and by the isms, I mean your racism, sexism, your phobias, your transphobia, your homophobia, all of these things that are created and help to maintain power and control for specific groups within that stratification system. Obviously, there's violence and political persecution, which again was talked about in length in the gender video. So I'm not going to get into that as much right now because we will also have a whole chapter on it. And then let's go into the next one, which is that connection between, this is the Dilawar article about the connection between white men, aggrievement, and mass shootings. And really, this was talking about a couple of main questions. What happens when social rank is questioned? What happens when that stratification, that hierarchy system doesn't allot them the things that they think it should allot them? And you get a lot of pushback. You get political rhetoric. You get good old boys talk. You get specific acts of violence, violence against women, domestic violence. You get bar fights. You get all of these types of violence that comes out of this idea that my social rank is being questioned. Again, what's next is that what happens when those perceived promises are not met, right? And with that social rank, we have ascribed kind of these certain ideas of what you should gain from that, right? When it comes to work. And for a lot of people, that is what it gains. But class intersects with that as well. And not always does class intersect in a positive way. You can be white, young, male, fitting a lot of the ideal types of masculinity and not be rewarded in the way of class structure based on generational family economic inequality and such of that nature. And what happens then is that you get a lot of usually younger white males who don't understand why those perceived promises are not met. And it ends up creating the systems of violence, these systems that perpetuate suicide. They perceive victimhood and that they're not getting what they feel they deserve. And that thing can create this, everybody is an enemy. It can create situations where you rally for people like Trump, who in his rhetoric uses a lot of similar things, these promises weren't met. I will give you those promises. I will do these things for you. I will give you back what it is you think you're owed. And all of these things surround that same idea that social rank was questioned and that these perceived promises I get from my social rank as a white young male aren't being met, and how do I get them back? And a lot of times those ways in which they assert that dominance again becomes forms of violence. And again, that last question really is, how is the entitlement to that American dream weaved into these notions? So we have a lot of ideas of bootstraps myth is also another way of talking about it, but where, if you work hard enough or you do this, you're going to gain these specific things. Or if you are this certain way and are raised a certain way, then you're gonna achieve this, you're gonna achieve that dream, you're going to be the millionaire, you're going to be the whatever, you're going to be secure, you're going to have all of these things allotted to you. And in a lot of ways, that's not how society works, because again, these intersections with class, these intersections with gender, these intersections with geography, these intersections with nationality, all of these things intersect in ways that do not make things as cut and dry as that. And the American dream, in a lot of ways, depends on your ability to access things which require you to have a specific set of privileges allotted to you first, whether that be economic, whether that be within your race, whether that be within your gender, whether that be a combination of some and combination of others, whether that be with you being straight or being part of that, like a specific type of family, what have you. The problem here with that becomes there's a lot of systems of oppression that work simultaneously with that. And you might have a lot of the criteria that is met for that, or you may be, or like Americans love that the stories of the exception, right? He was all of these things, had all of these things stacked against him, or she had all of these things stacked against her. And look, she rose to the top and still became this. And we love to latch onto that as this idea for why the American dream still works. Well, the ideal of the American dream only ever worked for a specific subset of people. Even when we started talking about the American dream, women didn't have the right to own property. Black individuals didn't have the right to own property. Really, any persons of color didn't have the right to own property. Even Irish immigrants didn't have the right to own property. And if that property was owned by a white male and something happened to that white male, the woman did not get the property because they weren't allowed to have it. And so unless they had a son, they didn't have anything. So this idea of the American dream was built on these notions, these false notions of what we prioritize in history. And so what happens with white men is that they get into that notion and they're like, but it's always worked for me, so it should still work for me. No, it only worked for the people that were capable of a class rank that allotted them the ability to have property. And that's what gained you so much rights. So there was a relative amount of necessity of certain kinds of statuses before you were really allotted that American dream, but yet we still tout it as this hard work is going to get you their ideology. And that's just not how our system currently or has ever operated. And so because of that, we have a lot of perceived promises that don't get met, and a lot of white men who find themselves feeling that they need to assert dominance in a very unhealthy and inappropriate way. And so that's kind of that. And then that's the end. So I hope that the 5 sexes lecture is separate too, so that's on there as well. And I hope that you guys have everything that you need. Please let me know if there's any questions you have or anything, any ways that I can help you as you work through this module. And I hope you guys are having a great week.